Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacy. You're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment, and our guest is Charley Valera. He's a realtor with Lair Realty Partners. He's also a commercial-rated pilot and owner of the FCA Flight Center, a flight training school. Charley's also an author and has just published My Father's War, Memories from Our Honored World War II Soldiers. Welcome to the show, Charley.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So tell us first about this exciting new book you have out.
Well, it is exciting. What I have done is I've interviewed dozens of World War II soldiers to get their stories. I wanted the stories that they really hadn't been sharing with their family members. And I think we were all entitled to hear what life was like for them in their early days. So I compiled separate sections of the book, and each veteran gets his own what I call book. So book 1, book 2, book 3, all within the book. And I have all these amazing stories. These people are just incredible. They call them the greatest generation, and that is such an understatement. It just amazes me. So that's what I've been doing. I wrote the book and got the interviews. I videoed them all to make sure that I got the story straight. And it was important to make sure that I got them the way they remembered it, exactly the way they remembered things. And there has to be 100 short stories in here.
Wow.
About their events, things from just the day-to-day life to battles and some tough stuff. I mean, it was war.
Yeah.
What made you originally want to write the book?
Well, there's a couple of things. I always had a fascination in World War II. As well as how it had its effects on families. My brothers and I, and most of us whose parents were in World War II, were kind of like these non-fighting veterans. And what I mean by that is that's my dad on the cover of the book, but the book isn't about him, it's about all our fathers that were there, and grandfathers and uncles. But what made me want to write it was the stories. When my dad passed away, all he ever said was that he was in England for 13 months. That was it. Well, 10 years later, I find out, he wasn't only in England 13 months. He was in Europe almost 3 years. He was property of the U.S. government for 4 years. And also during those 3 years, he was everywhere. He was shipped around. He was in North Africa, Rome, Po Valley, Sicily. I know she's nuts. I don't even look at that thing.
For those of you that can't see, Stacy's also filming live for Facebook Live for the first time.
Multitasking.
Yes.
Get Real with Bob and Stacy takes it up a notch.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it's pretty good though. Yeah. So that's why I wrote the book, because I wanted to find out about other soldiers, and I wanted family members to get some of the stories. And the things that I've heard since this has been published have been awesome. I've had family members. I had one guy recently say to me, if my father had passed away in his 80s, like a lot of guys did, we never would have heard these stories. And I've had another lady call me recently whose sister whose brother is in the book, and she said, we were always afraid to ask about it. So thank you for writing that. And it wasn't easy. I mean, I had to go back 2, 3, 4 times on every interview, and I probably conducted 24 or more.
Wow.
To allow them the fact that I was not I wanted the stories from the spokes in the wheel. I didn't want to get into, say, the West Point graduates or these highly decorated generals, because we can find all that stuff.
Right.
But what we didn't know is, what was the average guy like? How did he get through that war?
The lost stories sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely lost.
First of all, can you even have a favorite story? But give us one story.
There's no way you can have a favorite story. I can't even have a favorite veteran. These guys are all so amazing. But I'll give you one real simple, quick little story here. There was one of the guys who, when I spoke with him, he said, I was no hero. Yeah, they all said that. I was just doing my job. And they all said that as well. Well, tell me about your job. I was just a welder. Okay, what did you weld? Things on Army vehicles. I had 20-something guys that would work under me. I was like their foreman. And so we would weld things. And as you prod a little bit, a couple of things he had welded. One of them was they put these chains on tanks. So the troops are behind the tanks, like in the movies, and they're walking. But the tanks, he put chains on them, so they would go around and blow up the mines that were put
Wow.
out there around the tanks, so it wouldn't blow up the soldiers. That's
Wow.
no big deal. That's all he did, right? Come on. Another
Wow.
thing was he put on the front of the Jeeps. If you look at the old photos, you'll see a lot of the Jeeps during the European theater had metal bar sticking up from the front of it, and another one that came down on about a 45-degree angle. And what that was for was to cut wires. The Germans would put what they call decapitation wires across the roads, and of course they were right at head level, neck level, so that if you were driving a motorcycle or a Jeep with the windshield down, it
Wow.
would catch you. So he made these bars, and he had them put on all the Jeeps. And I thought, gee, yeah, that's all you did, huh, buddy? I just think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Those are the stories that I wanted to capture. Those are the types of people, just your average grandfather, you know?
Yeah.
So at the beginning of this process, how did you vet the stories? Because first of all, how many World War II veterans are there still out there?
Good question. You know, right now we're losing one every 3 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. 5 years from now, there probably won't be any left.
Wow.
Or certainly, you know, hopefully they'll at least be able to remember some of their war efforts. What I did was I spoke with some local people. I went to the veterans' offices, and I wanted to see who knew World War II veterans that were still had their mind together because they're in their 90s, and that could talk with me. So I interviewed a couple, but not many, and I ran out of people. I went to the local newspaper in the Sentinel and Enterprise, as well as the Telegram in Worcester, and asked if they would do a story that I was looking for veterans. The Sentinel did a great story, and I was inundated with phone calls from families, and I had people showing up. So from there, I went to interview pretty much anybody. Now, not everyone got in the book, but I needed, I wouldn't know until I got there. So I'd set up a video camera, and I'd video the interviews so I understood what they were saying, and I got it verbatim based on how they remembered it. And then I would take it back, I'd watch the video, I'd type it up, and try to do the research, the background work, so that the reader understood the difference between a C ration and a K ration, for instance. And then once I felt as though there was sufficient and enough of a story for me to enjoy, I thought a reader would enjoy it. But sometimes it just wasn't enough. There was one guy that said, you know, I was a pilot, and I went, oh, great, what did you fly? And he said he couldn't remember.
No, that stinks.
Yeah, that was a real bummer.
Yeah.
Wow. So how long did the entire process take? How many did you say stories are in here?
Oh, there's, well, I've got 18 soldiers in here with a focus on 10. And probably of those 10, there's probably somewhere around 100 individual stories. I wrote the book different. It's not like you have to sit and read this whole book, because you really don't. All you need to do is just, you can pick it up and grab one guy's section and read his 15 pages. There's a lot of photographs. Some are pretty brutal, but it was war. There's 137 photographs. Most of them have never been seen anywhere. And so, again, you know, it was war. They didn't cut back much. Some of it was pretty gory, and other things were pretty funny. There was some funny stuff that went on as well. Some crazy, goofy stuff.
Wow. So we have with us Charley Valera. He is the author of My Father's War, Memories from Our Honored World War II Soldiers. We have a few more questions for you, but before we go there, how can people find a copy of the book?
It's available on Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble. It's stocked in some of the Barnes & Noble stores. And, of course, I have a website. Who doesn't? charleyvalera.com, where if you went through that website, then I'll be able to personalize them.
Oh, good.
If you go through Amazon or Barnes & Noble, obviously I don't know how that's working, or I don't have anything to do with it. But I'd be happy. I've been doing a lot of book signings as well as presentations. I just did one at the Fort Devens Museum. So I've been pretty busy.
It's kind of awesome. I think students should learn this, like younger generations read some of these stories. Like, this is our history.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, to me, this was the real history, because these are the guys that made the difference. I mean, we needed the leaders, of course, but if you don't have the soldiers and you don't have the pilots and you don't have the groundwork, the support guys, it's not going to work.
And that's the story you never hear.
Right.
When I was going to school, it was, they talked about storming the beaches of Normandy, but other than that, you didn't hear a ton about it.
Right.
Or you didn't learn a ton about it. It was the 50,000 foot view instead of the
Right.
nuts and bolts of it all.
Yeah, and that's too bad, because same here when I was in school, and I was like, why wouldn't they bring up World War II? How come we're not learning more about that? My dad was there. How come they didn't bring it up? And you're right. There's one of the guys in here that was on Omaha Beach, and he gets into detail what it was like. And they were actually stuck, and they couldn't even open up their landing craft to attack because they were stuck in a crater, and so the water was real deep there, and everyone else was dropping their fronts and attacking, and they couldn't do it. And by the way, he couldn't swim, and the water was pretty deep, so he figured if that comes down,
Wow.
he's a goner. Crazy stuff.
Wow.
So, do you have any advice? Because I think fundamentally this is also about getting to know our own families. Like, how do you dig in? Because I think so many people, my grandfather was in World War II. I know nothing about any of it. Like, how do you get somebody to engage to really share their past?
Well, that's a good question too. What I did was I think most people are okay talking about themselves to a certain extent. So what you'll find that I did in the book was all the stories start with their families. So in other words, I wanted to know where were their fathers from, and mothers. Were they from Canada? Were they from Italy? Where did they come from? What were their names? What did they do for work? Did you have any siblings? Were any of them in the war? Where were you in the pecking order? So, they kind of relax a little bit, and they know I'm not there to dig deep into rooms where they don't want to go, because they've been really pushed into some pretty dark rooms, and I don't need to go there if they don't want to. But if they wanted to, they could. And I wanted everybody to feel safe that my intention was to write so that their children and grandchildren could read this book and be proud of their heritage and their families. And so there was no way I was going to get into something nasty, but you do have to kind of convince them a little bit that it's okay.
Right. So you mentioned that some of these, or many of them, you've videotaped as well. Is there a place where readers can go on and see some of the footage?
Yeah. Well, what I'm doing now is I'm uploading it to YouTube, and then from there I'll put links on my website. So you can, if you're reading the book or you're going through the pages and you want to see what exactly they said, it will be there. So it will be at charleyvalera.com. There's a section there that's going to be strictly for videos as well as additional photographs.
Right.
I only put 137 in here, but I probably have another 200.
Oh, wow.
And these were pictures that they took out when I went to talk with them. They would only some of them, maybe half the guys had tons of stuff. Just amazing things that they took back.
And have any of their family members reached out to you, their children, saying, wow, I had no idea that my dad went through this?
A real lot of them. Yeah. And that's been like an honor for me to have the children and grandchildren reach out to me and thank me or talk about it, send me emails, and it's just been awesome.
So what about a continuation of this book? There's got to be, now that you're out on book tour, there has to be 1 million more stories coming at you every day.
There is. It's nonstop. And I'm not opposed to doing something further on. For now, I've got my hands so full with this and everything else. But I definitely trying to consider where I would put the focus on the next book. So there's definitely one that can happen, and it probably will at some point. I'm almost certain of that. But for now, I actually have an event coming up. If I can bring it
Yes,
up?
talk about it.
It's at the end of March. It's the last Sunday in March. It's at the Leominster Veterans Center. And I'm going to have as many of the veterans there as I can get. So a lot of the guys will be
Awesome.
there, as well as open to the public. So you can come in, you can meet the guys that are in the book. You can have them sign your book or get your picture taken with them or whatever. I mean, these are the real heroes.
Yeah.
It's not, and so a bunch of those guys will be there. They've already told me that they'll
Wow.
be there. And, again, it'll be open to the public. And I can just envision these guys sitting there. Some of them probably in uniform. It's the coolest thing.
That's
They're
awesome.
so proud, yeah.
That is cool.
Wow.
And
So-
you said that's the last Sunday in March?
Yeah, I think it's the 26th.
All right, great. And that's at one more time, the location?
In Leominster, at the Leominster Veterans Center. It's on West Street in Leominster.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And we've only got about another minute left, but I wanted to ask you real quick about the flight school that you own. Where is that based out of?
That's at the Fitchburg Airport.
Mm-hmm.
And we have 8 different styles of aircraft that people can train in, as well as you can rent them after you get your license.
Mm-hmm.
And have 8 instructors. So they're busy. They're very, very busy.
Wow. So is that the only place you can go to learn at
That's the
FCA or only place locally?
That's the only place locally, yeah.
Excellent.
There are other flight schools here and there
Yeah.
throughout the country.
Yeah.
But we're very busy.
How long does it take to get a license or to go through the training?
That really depends on the student. You know, if you come prepared, you do your homework, you study. If you're flying 2 or 3 times a week, which is a lot, but that's what it takes because it's repetition.
Yeah.
You can do it anywhere from 4 to 8 months.
Oh, wow.
There's some written exams you have to take. You have to get a medical exam as well, and some flying exams. But it's both book work and flying work. So it's a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
Excellent.
and the price will vary as well. Again, if you're prepared, if you play with Flight Sim at home or something like that, that helps a wicked lot.
Really?
Yeah.
We'll have to look into that, too, before we get started.
That sounds
Stace.
kind of cool.
Yeah, you want to do that. Oh, yeah.
Excellent. That's about all the time we have. Thanks for joining us on the show today, Charlie.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more Get Real after this.